It's Bill.
Hey, Andrea.
Hello, and hello,
Hello.
Sammy. You're muted, Sammy, but I'm going to unmute you.
Got it. Yeah, just fixed it.
Unmute.
All
Terrific.
right.
Nina's here. Kayla's here. All right. Now, I believe, as far as I know, Camille will be joining us synchronously. We might just give her a minute to arrive. I didn't see any message from her indicating otherwise, but it'll either be a party of 5 or 6. This
Sounds
is a smaller group, Bill. We haven't met you yet, have we, Bill, in placemaking?
Yeah, this is the first time.
I'm all in a sort of a time and space warp because I'm in the same place. You're in the same place. You got the same cool pilot headset on, and yet it's a different class.
It works. It works. Yeah. No worries.
So I'm going to make you, Bill. We tried this yesterday, and I want to make you. I can't recall if making you co-host was.
Yeah, I think co-host ought to work. In fact, I'm not even sure you need. Yeah.
It would only be if I make you a co-host, then I think you're supposed to have all the sharing and.
Yep, it looks like it.
Privileges.
I do have the option to share my screen now. I didn't have it until you gave me co-host.
Great. Okay. So I'll just double check. Oh, we should introduce ourselves, in which case. Well, you all know who I am. So, Bill, would you like to let the students know who you are, and then we'll take a quick word?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Winston. I work for the Olin Library, and I am a GIS analyst. And so that means I work with spatial data, and I work with students and faculty and staff at the university to help them understand how to apply spatial data, how to create it, and then what we're going to talk about today is using a story map to share basically spatial information and other information as well.
It's very cool stuff.
Yes, it is. It's a fun job.
Yeah, and we've been getting creative these past couple of weeks. We all have, of course, but I'm excited to say that I think that Bill's material and his presentation works really well for this format, which is not always the case. So we're lucky in that regard.
Yeah, actually, have you handed out the Word document?
There she is. Camille's here. So I have posted the documents we'll be using. Hello, Camille. It's been a while.
Yeah, hi.
I'm so excited you're with us.
Finally here, guys.
Yeah, no, this is great. So we were just getting started, and Bill Winston, our GIS analyst, had just introduced himself, and I was going to refer you all to the area that we'll be working off of on Canvas. This is under modules and story map projects. There's a tab right at the top. And when you click the down arrow, you'll see what we need for today, which the rubric, the guidelines rubric, are something that we'll go over amongst ourselves. But while we are doing this workshop with Bill, it'll be the second document that's labeled 4.1 Anthro Workshop 1 Raw Materials. So that should be what you need. So you want to go ahead and download and open that up. And then once you've got that, I'd love for you to just share maybe briefly with Bill where you are in the world and the coolest map you've looked at in the last week. If you have looked at any maps, I have the feeling that most of us have. Or in your lifetime, you know, whichever comes to mind.
Oh, are we starting?
Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
Hi, I'm Nina, nice to meet you. And I guess the coolest map, I haven't looked at a whole lot of maps before this class, actually. But I think the coolest one was, I forgot what it was called, but they were the maps that we looked at where you could like look at specific, really specific areas. You know what I mean?
Was it the Opportunity Atlas, Nina?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, the
right.
Opportunity Atlas. I thought that was so cool. And it
Yeah,
had information. It was
yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah, and so many different topics. Like, I mean, of course, income, race, and education and everything. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. And where are you?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm in St. Louis.
That's right. Still in St. Louis.
Mhm.
Terrific. Kayla, I suspect that that map also interested you simply because I know you did something very creative in your podcast, which was mentioning the Opportunity Atlas and some experimenting you had done on that platform, and then telling us about it, which I must say was a first, which I think is great that you're sort of crossing the audio, the sound and the visual sort of mapping barriers there, which is very cool. But without further ado, Kayla.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm currently also in St. Louis. And I also, yeah, I did really enjoy like the Opportunity Atlas. I also, I think it was like last semester, I don't remember what it was called, but it was also a story map that I looked at that basically had like, you could look into maps of different areas and like people would be able to like post just like stories about like being queer and like queer experiences that they've had, and like they'll show a little location of like where that story like look took place and stuff, and it was just really cool to see like over a long period of time people's stories associated with certain places.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, was that a St. Louis or Missouri specific, or was that more broader?
It was more national, but I was like specifically looking at it in St. Louis.
Okay. And I'll go left to right on my screen. Oh, I finally figured this out. I think the way that our faces are ordered has to do with the order that people log in. Because it's not alphabetical. It's not something that's really been bothering me. So I couldn't work out the logic. But to my left, it's Sammy anyway. Sammy, would you like to say hi?
Yeah, so I'm Sammy. I'm currently in Westchester County, New York. My favorite map that I've looked at, well, I did my podcast project on the St. Louis Aquarium that just opened up, and there was a cool interactive map there focusing on water flow, and so you could like influence or you could shape the sand and it would like visually project different like topographical formations, and you could like learn about water flow like that. So I thought it was a cool like mixed media like map experience in that kind of way. But I was looking through story maps from students in this class prior to like just getting inspiration, and I thought the story map that compared like raccoon population segregations with like the Del Mar Divide was really interesting. Like I wouldn't even know how you would like think of that to begin with, but I thought that was like pretty creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me make a quick comment about your sandbox thing. We actually have an augmented reality sandbox that works very exactly like you described in the library.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, in the Newman Exploration Center, it's actually right beneath Whispers. There's a circular stairwell there in the library. You can go downstairs, and we have once the library is open again, and obviously we don't know when that will happen. But yeah, we have a similar device in that space.
Oh, that'd be really cool to check out too. I didn't get to do it because it was like swarmed by all the kids at the aquarium. So definitely try it there.
It's not too busy, and usually there's plenty of time to get down there. So I recommend it.
Oh, that sounds so cool. I have a growing list of things I'm going to do immediately once we're able. And the aquarium, I have to say, is right at the top of my list after.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I think it sounds fantastic. I'll say from Sammy from your podcast, which yes, we will talk about podcasts in the second half of class. And then on my far right, last but not least, Camille. Hello.
Hi, I'm Camille. I'm like a little bit outside St. Joseph, Missouri. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's like north of Kansas City. I was in another class where we did a little bit of GIS stuff, and I compared like two municipalities in St. Louis, and I did these Webster Groves and Tower Grove, but we used this thing called like Geo St. Louis, which is it was kind of similar to the Opportunity Atlas, which I don't know, that was like one of the things I thought was really cool. So just like you can like continue like zooming in down to like the street, which was really cool.
All right. I'm gonna look that up. Geo St. Louis. Cool. All right.
Well, all right. I guess we'll get started then.
Yeah.
So it sounds like everybody's had a chance to look at some of those, some of the story maps from last time. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here and share this one. Okay, can everybody see me? I've got the Canvas page up.
Yeah.
You mentioned the isolated raccoons page. I love this one. That's the cutest raccoon I think I've ever seen. And I just wanted to quickly talk about what a story map is and the whole point behind it. A story map is an environment that's been set up to allow users to create very quickly a web page that includes texts, images, and other basically multimedia, including dynamic maps. And that's really the thing that sets it apart, is the ability to include these maps that actually allow your user to decide what's important. So I'm scrolling down in this page, and you can see this one, this person was talking about the Del Mar Divide. And if I interact with this map, and let's see, it's not turning on here. There we go. So if I actually explore the map, it allows me to click and zoom around the space, and I can zoom in on areas that might be of interest to me. And in fact, in this case, they've activated a pop-up window on some of the features there. So the user is able to basically query the data sets that have been shared in these maps, and I can decide where I want to go and what I want to look at. And so that's really the advantage here. Now, in this case, they've included a pop-up, and we'll talk about this in our session next week about formatting these pop-ups, because right now it looks like they've basically added every attribute that's in this data set to the pop-up, and that may not be the best way to actually present that sort of information. But we'll talk about that next Wednesday. The story map itself allows the developer to combine these maps with some text and in some cases imagery to tell a story. And that's what this person did as far as understanding or talking about what the raccoon population in the city of St. Louis and how that might be impacted by various things. So this is kind of an example of what you could do with it. There were several other examples, but the focus of our workshop today is going to be working through introduction to this platform and understanding exactly how to use it and how to take information and pour it into this template so that you can build your own story maps. So the first thing we need to do is log in to the story map environment. And so if you go to woostel.maps.arcgis.com, you should be able to log in there. You'll probably get a screen that looks like this. And you're going to want to click on the enterprise login for Washington University.
Should we do that now?
Yes, please. And I want to make sure you guys are able to follow along. So if I get ahead of you, please stop me or slow me down anyway, and I'll wait for you. And I'm having, I hate to say it, a little bit of issues with my internet connection right now. So bear with me here.
Oh, we're all in the same boat, Bill. I've been getting pinwheels. I restart my system. I shut things down. And there's just sort of a lot more traffic, I think, is the issue.
Yeah, so for you guys, you have probably not logged in prior to this. And so you will see the familiar Woostel Key login page, and it'll prompt you for that information. Has everybody logged in?
Yes.
Okay, looks like a yes. So you should be seeing a screen like this. This is the home screen for your ArcGIS Online homepage. And ArcGIS Online is kind of an overarching application, and story mapping is part of that. So if you look on the far right, you'll see a little symbol that looks like a person. That's basically allows you to get to your profile page. So if you click on that icon, go to My Profile, and refresh your page, and hopefully you will see your profile load. And for me, I've got, I'm going to have to stretch this a little bit to see if I can get my page to view properly. On the left-hand side of my page, I've got my name. I want you to make sure your first and last names are entered here. And so there's a little pencil next to that. Just click on that and enter your first and last names and save that. And then under the bio section, I'd like you to make sure you enter in Anthro. This is 360, right,
Yeah.
Andrea? Yeah, so enter in Anthro 360 to that and save that as well. And I'm getting some issues here with trying to update that.
Mine seems to have gone through.
Okay, I'm not going to worry about mine because that's not that important.
And I wanted to encourage you all, I know we practiced raising our little hands, virtual hands last time, but it might be easier for the purposes of this session while we're screen sharing and so forth, just to unmute yourself and just interject anytime you have a question. So don't be shy.
Yes, please don't be shy. So once you finish with your profile, come back to your home page and you will see at the far right, just to the next of your profile icon, there's a little grid of dots. If you click on that, it's going to actually allow us to go to one of the other applications that are included in this ArcGIS online environment. And the one we're going to work on today is Story Maps. So find that icon and click on it, and that should take you to the Story Map page. And so you should be at a page that looks very much like this. Did we lose someone?
I see four faces, or well.
Oh, I see. I had a link that I wasn't seeing.
Oh.
Okay. So this is the home page for story maps, and you guys will basically be seeing this create new story map option. I've got a couple of story maps on my page, and this is the home page where once you get back into this and after you've begun to develop stories, your stories will appear in this page, and this is how you will get to come back in and edit stories that you've already published or that you're working on in draft mode. But for now, let's create a new story. So just click on that icon, and it's going to launch our story builder application. So now we're going to take material that Andrea has compiled for us, and we're going to pour it into this template. And so the Word document that was shared, the raw materials document, if you guys would open that up, we're going to pull some information from it. And the first thing I need to do is we're going to go to this American Bottoms web page. So there's a URL on the document. It's the americanbottoms.org page. And I've already got a link here in my, my browser. So I'm going to go to that page, and give me a second. I'm going to actually get back up to the top here so you can see the intro. So this is what you should be seeing, the significant and insignificant mounds. It's a site by Jennifer Colton, excuse me, and Jesse Vogler. They're from the architecture department, and they were studying the region, and we're going to take a few images from this page and use it in our story map. And so the first one I want to get is the one we're going to use as our introductory image, and that's this one called the Powell Mound. So if you find this on the page, just scroll down until you see it, and then you can right click and copy the image. And this is how you would actually want to, if you're trying to take some imagery from the web, for some of the items in the story map, you're going to need to have those files located locally on your computer. So I've copied that, and now I'm going to use my file manager, and I'm just going to paste it into my desktop. And in fact, for simplicity's sake, I think I have a Murray file here. Hold on, let me find it. There's a Murray file. I'm going to go in here and set up a new folder. And I'm just going to call this STL demo. And then I'm going to go in there and right click and paste that image. And it looks like I've lost it. So let me go back and get it again. Actually, maybe it's a save image as. Let's try that.
Hopefully some of these images will look familiar. I know I had assigned chunks of this. Well, it's not really a story map, but it's got the elements of a story map, doesn't it, this website? But we didn't really talk about it much, so that's why I wanted to use this.
Okay. Well, I'm going to save this as Powell Mound. And now back in the development page for the story map, let me find that. So you guys should be back at this page now. The first thing we're going to do is click on the Add Image button. And that opens up a browser that lets you browse on your local system and just find that image that you downloaded. And we're going to go ahead and use that. I need to mess my screen up a little bit. Hold on. So that I can see everything. So I'll choose that image. And now it's going to paste it into my story map page. Now there's a few other things we want to add here. So we're going to title our story, and the document that we provided has that text. So the title is going to be Mounds of Missouri, and the subtitle is Uncovering Hidden Histories of St. Louis. So I'm just going to actually copy that second subtitle text. I'm just right-clicking in the Word document, copying that text. I'll bring it over, and if you click on the section of the page where the subtitle is, you should see an insert cursor there, and you can paste that text in it. For the title, I'm just going to type that value in. So I click on title, and we're going to call this Mounds of Missouri. I'll fix my typo there. Now, there's a little bit of adjustment that we can make here at the beginning with the image that we see there. There's a gear at the top of the page that allows you to control some properties. If you click on that, basically we have a single property that we can control, and that's the focal point on this image. And as you can see, there's a round dot here in the middle of that image. If you click on the image itself, it kind of moves that focal point around. And on the right-hand side, you see a laptop image and basically a tablet or telephone image that shows you what these screens are going to look like on those two devices. So depending on the orientation, the focal point doesn't make a lot of difference on a laptop. But if you look at how it appears in the cell phone or tablet image, you can control basically what the center point of that image is. And so you want to think about that when you're designing this, because you never know whether your user is going to be looking at this page either on a desktop or laptop computer or on their mobile device. And so you get to pick the focal point there. And then this alternative text is an optional box that would allow you to type in some text that a screen reader would use to read the content of that for visually impaired users. So I'm going to just add Powell Mound in there, and then I'll click Save. And the save option basically saved that text, but one thing to recognize about the story map environment is it automatically saves your content. And you can see up here on the top bar, it shows that this is a draft, and that it's saved. And every time you make some changes, you'll see that sometimes it'll switch to saving and then save, but you don't actually have to click a save button to as you build the page. It will automatically save going forward. So that sets up the beginning of the page. Now we want to actually get to the point where we add some content. And so if you use your scroll wheel, you can push upwards and it basically scrolls down on the page, and you'll see the next section of this, which allows us to begin telling our story. So I'm going to go back over to the Word document, and I'm going to steal some more text off of that. there is a section called introductory paragraph. I'm going to grab that text out of the Word document, just copy that whole little section there, and then come back into the story map. And you'll see here an add content block, which is denoted by this little aqua circle with the plus sign in it. If you click on that, it opens up a panel that shows you all the different types of tools that we have to add content. The first section here at the top has 6 different formatted text types that we can add to the map. And we'll start with a paragraph type. So just click on the word paragraph, and then you can just control V or option or command V to paste that text into that space. And so now we get the introductory text that would bring people into our page and begin to tell them what our story is all about. Now, there were several different formatting options for the text, and I'm just going to click on a single sentence here in the middle of this paragraph to highlight that. And when you do that, you get another formatting bar that pops up. And right in the middle of that bar, there's a vertical line. It's very faint and it's hard to see, but the 4 icons on the left of that line are basically refer to formatting just the highlighted section of text. So if I want to make it bold, I can click that button and it changes that bit of text. The 5 icons to the right actually refer to other formats for this entire block of text. So if I click on the first one, which is basically the header type, the header text, it changes all of the text in the box to that particular format. And you can experiment with this. I'm just going to double click to highlight one word, and you actually might need to click off of the text and then back on it to make that formatting box show up again. But any of the options that you pick here are going to reformat that whole section of text. There is not a whole lot of variety that you can apply here. Just keep in mind that the story maps are a template, and so you're limited to whatever options they've made available to us in the template. And sometimes it can seem like those are much fewer than you might want. But in this case, I think there is enough variety that we'll be able to tell an interesting story. And at the end of the session, I'll show you a couple of ways that you can improve the ability to make other changes. So we've added some text. We've learned how to format that text. Now I'd like to go ahead and add a map into this story. So if you mouse down below the text section that you just brought in, and over here on the left hand side you'll see, depending on where your mouse is, you'll be able to get that add content block to come up again. So click on it this time, and now there's some other sections to point out. The 2 in the middle here, button and separator, these just basically add some separation items or a button that you could actually use to link to a different page. So these are other elements you could add to the page, and we're not going to really talk about those today. Below that, we have image, video, map, and embed. These are ways to embed other content into our page, and the next thing we're going to do is bring in an image. So just click on image. And now we're actually going to go ahead and use the Powell Mound image that we brought down before. I'm going to click on that and use that image. Minimize this for a second and choose that image. And now we've embedded an image inside the page. So it's slightly different than the main image that appears at the beginning of the page. When we enter and when we add images into the page, we have a few different ways that we can format those images. Right now, if you mouse over the little set of icons at the top of the image, these allow you to change the different formatting. Right now it's set up to be a small image, but I also have a medium and a large option. Medium just makes it a little bit bigger. Large would actually stretch it across the entire page. But there is a requirement that the image file actually has, in this case, it needs to be 1920 pixels wide in order to be formatted in that large option. So that's why that option is grayed out. The other things I'll point out up here is the properties icon allows you to set that alternative text. I'm not going to set that right now. And then the trash can icon basically allows you to delete that content, and you could then come back and put in another image or some other type of text there. The one on the far left is the floating option, and I'm going to click that because it basically then sets the image over to one side, and if you mouse over to the right of that image, and you might need to click a little bit to get the add content block to show up, but at some point you can get that to appear, and then we'll be able to add more text here. So I'm going to go back to my Word document, and in this case, let's see. Actually, let's just take this first text block again and copy and paste that in as a paragraph. And down here at the bottom, I'm just going to add in a couple of hard returns so that my insert box is back over here on the left-hand side. And so this is what it looks like when you format a floating image alongside some text beside it. And you can make this, you can use this function to add some interest to your page, and then present the image here and talk about the image over here on the right with that text. You also have the option to add a caption below the image. And so I'm just going to click on that text, and we'll just call this Powell Mound. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, then just come back out to the main page, and now we're going to add another interesting bit of information. Instead of an image, this time we're going to add a map. So click on the map option, and actually I'm going to start here, but I'm going to pause for a second and make sure everybody's on the same page. Are we good to go? Everybody okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And actually, give me just a second. I wanted to capture the screen here. Bear with me for just a second. Okay. So now the add a map option basically allows you to bring in maps that have been created or shared with you, or to create what's called an express map. And so we're going to start with an express map. So just click on that icon. And express maps are a way to build content that allows you to visually show, spatial information. An express map is something that would be fairly basic. You're not going to use this to make a very complex map, but you would use it to, for instance, point out the location of some of the mounds that we might be wanting to talk about in this story map. Now, when you guys open this tool, you might actually see something that's called the overview. I'm going to display that using this Express Maps overview option, but you guys would probably see something like this when you clicked on Add Express Map. This basically shows you what an express map is, and it walks you through the process of how you would create that. So there are several drawing tools that you can use to add items on top of the map. And then you're able to add some finishing touches like labeling, and then text and images over in the legend. And then of course you can add that story to your map. And so I'm just going to close this little tutorial section here with the Got It button. If you ever want to look at that, you can actually display that using this Express Maps overview option at the lower left. Now, we want this Express Map to help users understand what area we're talking about. So I'm just going to double click on the United States to zoom into this area. And I'm just going to keep zooming in until we get into the St. Louis region. Hey, Andrea.
Yeah.
Do you know where that Powell Mound is?
Oh,
generally speaking?
Well, I think it's in Collinsville, but you mean more specific than that?
No, that would be okay. I mean, I know where I know where Monk's Mound is, but I'm not sure about the Collinsville one. So let's say we wanted to add a couple of points to this map to help people understand where that that Powell Mound is. So the way these drawing tools work is you just click on it to activate it, and then you can come into the map and click to add a point. And so, excuse me, this will add a point there. And if you notice over in the left-hand margin of the map, you've got a new item added. Do you have a question, Camille?
Yeah, can you do how to add the point again? I was like on the
Yeah,
map.
sure.
And I missed it.
No problem. At the top of the map, you'll see all those icons.
Gotcha.
And I just use the one for adding a point. If you mouse over them, each one of them will kind of show you what it does. But just click to activate it and then come back down into the map. And I'm just going to add another one for Cahokia Mound right now. So I've added 2 points into my map. And I'm going to go ahead over here on the left-hand side. You can see there's a place where I can add the name. I'm going to call this Cahokia Mound, or I'm going to call this Monk's Mound. That's my second point. And let's see, did we have some text in there? We've got some text for the first map. And so I'm going to come back to this in a second. For the Monk's Mound, I'm just going to come back over and add a bit of text here. And I'm going to call this a Cahokia Mounds Historical Site in the description. We'll come back and add an image here later, but I'm going to click done for that one. And now, once you've done that, you can see your drawn layers are shown here on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on the untitled dot, which is the first one that I added. And I'm going to edit this one, and we're going to call this Powell Mound. And then back in the Word document, there is some text here. And so I'm going to take that caption text, and I'm going to click and copy it and come back and put it in my description here. So I'll paste that.
Bill, would an intersection for the location of Powell Mound be helpful?
No, that's okay. I mean, I think for our purposes right now, it really, I'm not striving for accuracy, more so to help them understand how to use the tools. So yeah, that's okay. Now let's see, we also have the option to add an image here, and I hate to do it, but let's use that same image again. So if you click on the plus symbol there for the Powell Mound point, we can actually use our Powell Mound image again. We're going to get some mileage out of this guy. And so choose that one, and you can see it now appears as part of that. So I'm going to click done again, and now I've got 2 points in my layer, and they're indicated here as points on the map. If you mouse over them, you'll see that the description and the image that we've added there pop up as we go over those points. Monk's Mound doesn't have an image, so it doesn't show up there. Now, over here on the left-hand side again, under Draw Layers, there's an option at the top. The little gear allows you to control the properties. So if you click on that, for the Express maps, you have actually a choice of 3 different base maps. Right now we're using the one on the left-hand side, but if you click the middle base map, it changes our base map to basically something that will look familiar to those of you who have used Google Earth. And so these are basically aerial images. I could click and drag and basically present my map a little bit in that way. And then the other base map is another one very similar to the first one, but it includes a little bit more features here. So I'm going to leave it as the basic base map here. And there is also a control for turning on and off the legend. If you turn it on, you'll see the only thing in my map here is points. So my legend is not very instructive. And so I'm not going to actually leave that on in the Express map. I'll turn that back off. And so now I've created my map. I'm happy with the way it looks. I can go back and place that map. when you do that, it basically brings it back into the story map. It presents it with the same or similar set of options that we had with the images that we brought in. So we can control the size. In this case, it does have the resolution that would allow me to make it large. So I'm going to do that. And it now just takes up the entire page width, which is kind of nice. The other icons that are different from the previous one is the addition of this edit icon. And so if you want to come back into this to the Express map, and let's say we wanted to add something else. Perhaps we wanted to add a polygon or a line feature. And looks like it's having a moment about redrawing. I'm going to zoom in and zoom out again, and that forces the map to refresh. But let's just say I wanted to add a polygon to the map. I'm going to activate the area tool, and I'm just going to go down here near Cahokia Mounds, and I'm just going to draw a little box in here that we'll use to define this Cahokia Mounds web historical site. So I've added that text to describe that polygon. I'm going to click done here.
Could you show how you drew the polygon?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. I activated the polygon tool. And once the tool is activated, you can come in the map and just click to set a vertex. And then as you move your mouse, it remains connected to the vertex. Just click again to set another vertex. And each time you click, you're going to set a vertex in the map. And when you're done, just double click to close the polygon. Oops. Double click. And that closes the polygon. And so now I've got that option there. And I believe if you click on it to highlight it, you can actually use the delete key to get rid of it if you are playing around and you don't want to leave that item there. But so I've made some changes to my map. I can place it again. And when I come back out to my story map, now I've got that object, and the icons still work and allow me to pop up that extra information. So my users will be able to access the information that I stored there through their usage. And I can also, of course, add a caption down here about mounds of Missouri. Actually, these are mounds of Illinois.
Technically, yes, I should be more accurate.
Yes. In this case, these are mounds of Illinois. All right, so I've added the caption there. And let me just check my notes here. I've got an Express map done. And the other thing I wanted to show you was, now that we've added our Express map, we've talked about adding points and lines. We can also add other media to the story map. So come down below the Express map and click the plus symbol. And instead of adding an image from my local system, I'm going to embed some content from the web. And so we're going to embed a video that talks about the Cahokia Mounds, the Cahokia Mounds website. So I've actually found a video on YouTube, and I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this URL. Whoops. I'm going to share this through the chat window, so bear with me a second. Sounds like somebody's mowing the grass.
Yard work.
Yep. Okay, so there's the URL for this video. If everybody could grab that from the chat. And then come back to your story map and open up the add content block and go to the embed button, and you can just paste that URL into the embed content block and save it. Okay, so now we've got our video embedded. We've got all of the options there. The one other option that we do have now is to display this content as a card. If you click on that, it basically just changes the format and presents it in a slightly different way. You get a little bit of a description of the video and a thumbnail. I tend to like using the standard presentation there, but you know, you have that other option. And let's see, we've talked about floating images and adding video. Now, I'd like to talk about adding a sidecar. So let's use the add content block option again. And the 3 items down here on the bottom of that window are sidecar, slideshow, and guided tour. And the slideshow and the guided tour are both beta functions. And what that means is they're in development and they're not ready for prime time. So you're welcome to experiment with these, but I wouldn't use one of those in a story map that you were going to turn in for credit, for instance. The sidecar, on the other hand, is something that's actually ready to use. So let's click on the sidecar, and I'll show you how to format and work with that option. The sidecar is basically another way to present images, maps, and beside text. And so we're going to take some information from the Word document again, and we're going to bring that in. So if you scroll down to the section where we see the Cahokia Mound subdivision and Monk's Mound, let's capture that text down below it, the descriptive text nestled between burial mounds. Let's copy that section of text, and we're going to bring it up and put it into the sidecar where it says continue your story. Just paste that text in there. Now we need to add an image, and instead of copying the image from the web, I'm going to go ahead and find the image in the American Bottoms webpage, and we'll embed the link to that image through the add embed option. So change your browser to the American Bottoms site again, and we're going to scroll down and find Monk's Mound here. And it's probably about halfway down the page. I'll let you know when I find it.
I heard that drive-in movie theaters are making a comeback in this era of self-quarantine, so I thought I'd...
Are they? So should I use the Mounds drive-in image?
Either one. I suppose I was just captivated by the Mounds drive-in advertising.
Yeah, I love that. Let's actually use it. So let's see, it's about 2/3 of the way down the page. You'll see this Mounds drive-in picture. And if you right-click, you can copy the image address. And depending on what browser you're using, you may see different terminology here. But the point is you need the address for the image, not the address for the page. So copy that image address, and then we'll come back to our Mounds of Missouri, and we're going to add an embed here. Just paste that URL, save that, and now we should see that image load here beside our page. I'm going to refresh my page here, and hopefully that will bring it back in.
Well, did you say that copy image location might be one of the ways it's phrased?
It might be, but actually it's probably more like a...
isn't loading either. I think it might
Yeah,
be.
mine's not either. Let's punt that idea and copy the image, or I'm sorry, save the image as. So we're going to save the Mounds drive-in into the folder on your local system.
And you in general recommend Chrome is your favorite for using this?
Yeah, you know, in fact, today I'm working in Safari, and so far it's working okay, but I have had issues with Safari in the past, and in fact, I didn't give that any thought when I started this session. But normally I would be working in Chrome or Firefox. Those are two that I haven't noticed any problems.
I'm for this today, and it's actually working pretty smoothly. I'm impressed. So.
Okay, good. So since my image is not showing up, I'm going to use the trash can to delete it, and then say yes to delete, and then we're going to add the image, and we'll use the local copy of that image now. the Mounds Drive-In. And click choose, and that should work a little bit better. So now I scrolled up a little bit, and as I scroll down, you'll see the image kind of locks in place, but the text is floating on the left-hand side. That's the behavior you're going to get with this sidecar option here. And so if you look along the bottom bar of the page, you'll see there's a little sidecar text on the left-hand side with an expand option next to it. When you click that, it shows you the development panel for the sidecar. Basically, this allows you to add several slides side by side in this panel, and then as we scroll up and down the page, we'll see those slides. So let's add another one, and at the far right, you've got a new slide option. So just click that. We'll get another slide to add. You can see it's highlighted in the bar at the bottom, and I've now got a blank slate up top. So let's get another story here. I'm going to go back out to the Word document, and we've got a section about another mound. It's right below the nestled between burial mounds text that we pulled in. Let's get this section. It's called Travelers Heading East Across Missouri. So grab that text, copy and paste it into your story. And then we're going to do the same thing with another image from the American Bottoms site. And I'm going to scroll back up a little bit because the one I want has the gas station in it. It's up here near, it's called Milam. It's about halfway down the page. And there's a Pilot gas station shown there. So I'm going to right click and save that image. And I'm just going to call this Pilot.
This is
And then come back.
This one especially because when we were driving back from Cahokia, many of you will recall that we were looking for the name for this landfill. So there it is. We found it.
And this one is called, let's see, isn't this Powell? Or no, this is, did you ever find out what the name was?
So the one that's situated behind the Pilot station?
Yeah.
Apparently it's called Milam Landfill.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll use that. So let's come back to the story map and add the image. And I'll use the Pilot image that I saved. And so now we've got that image in. Now, another thing that we can add into the sidecar is a map. So let's go back to the new slide. And in this case, we're going to add a map. And instead of using an express map, I want to show you how to bring in another map. And if you just go to the Living Atlas, you should have that option along the top bar here. Just click on Living Atlas. And if you scroll down a little bit, we'll see at one point a National Geographic style map. And so we're going to actually use that as part of our sidecar. So click on that map. Did everybody find that? Okay. So this is it's a curated map. National Geographic provides this, and it allows us to basically use their beautiful cartography in our story map. So I'm just going to zoom in to the St. Louis area. And Cahokia Mountain State Park actually shows up in their map. So I'm going to zoom in to that point on the map. And now I'm going to place it. So I'm not going to add any other items here. This function doesn't actually allow you to draw anything on the maps. So I'll place that map. And now I've got information, or now I've got their map included in my story map. So I could add some more text here. I think I've got some left over in my clipboard. I'm just going to paste it in here just as an example to have some text alongside this map. The other thing I want to show you is the ability to duplicate a slide. Sometimes when you're working with a map, you want to show several different locations on the same map. And one way to do that in a sidecar is to duplicate the map. So if you'll notice along the bottom right-hand corner of the slide that I'm working in, there's a 3-dot ellipsis. If you click on that, there's an option to duplicate that slide. So go ahead and put that in, and now we've got that second instance of the slide highlighted. I'm going to go back up into the map and zoom out a little bit. There's a zoom tool in the far right lower corner. I'm just going to zoom out a couple of spots. And Andrea, do you remember where that gas station is?
Yeah, I think it's it said corner of okay. Oops, I'm on the wrong tab. Give me 1 second. Okay. Oh, sorry, I just scrolled past it again. Could I just look up the address of it?
Well, this one doesn't have actually a search, an ability to search for an address. So I'm just going to zoom into it.
It said corner of Collins. Yeah, it just said corner of Collinsville Road and Kings Highway.
Okay.
But I didn't know.
Well, then I'm just going to kind of wing it.
Yeah.
Let's just assume it's over here in this little bottoms area. And so I'm just going to place it at another location, and then we'll save that map. Actually, I need to be editing this map, sorry. I forgot to mention this. There's an edit tool along the top of the map. And although I was moving around, it's not actually changing the location of my map as far as where it's going to be stored. So you need to edit it to actually open it up to change the orientation of where that map is. So now I'm going to browse just a little bit and zoom in to a new spot. And then I'm going to place the map again. So now I've got my fourth map, or my fourth slide in the sidecar is this view. The third view is this one, which has Cahokia Mounds State Park. And then I've got 2 images. So for now, let's consider that to be a completed sidecar. I'm going to collapse the menu at the far left, and then I'm going to scroll up and down. You'll see as you scroll up and down through the sidecar, the text moves and the image stays put until you flip to the next slide. And so this is basically designing that sort of experience for your user. And as you scroll up, each one of the maps change. And here on the lower one, because we're using the same map, it actually, instead of just flipping to the new view, it actually browses to that new view and kind of shifts the map over. And that's kind of an interesting transition there. After we get to the bottom, you keep scrolling up and it moves you down below it, and you could begin to add some more content. So if you go back to the Word document, we've got actually a set of text for a closing statement. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I've got a section called closing text. I'm going to grab that, and you can see this is formatted as a quotation. And so I'm going to copy this, and when I come back in to insert it in my story map, I'm going to use the quote format. So I click on that and then just paste this in. And this is what a quote looks like in the story map. And that basically will hopefully provide a little bit of closure to the story, wrap it up in a nice little bow, and end that for the user. So are there any questions up to this point as far as adding content to the story map? Okay, I'm going to scroll back up to the top, all the way to the top of my story map, and I'm going to point out some items here on the top menu bar. So thus far, we've been in design mode, and or we're actually been designing our content. It's listed as draft mode because we haven't shared it with anyone yet. And so let's go to the preview option. And when you click that, it basically opens it up in a view as your user would see it. So as we scroll down, you'll see we don't have the inserts anymore. This is basically what the thing looks like when a user comes in. And on our Express map, we can mouse over some of these icons. We'll see the information we added there. If I click on the area, it pops up that area information. Same should go for these icons. It'll pop it up in a window that stays put until I close it. And then if I'm clicked into the map, the scroll bar and the left clicking will actually allow me to move around in it. If I want to continue using the story map, I'll need to basically close this map using this little button here on the upper right, and then I can continue scrolling down my story. Could play the video. I get to the point where my sidecar is, and now the images are freezing, the text is moving, and we're flipping between those. And you can see the little dots on the left-hand side give you an idea for how many slides are included in that sidecar. So I've got 4 slides in the sidecar, scroll through them, and then I get to the bottom and my closing text. And so this is what a user would see. Along the top bar, you can also see there are different display devices, a desktop, a tablet, and a cell phone. So you're able to actually preview the page in the kind of device that you would see, at least as far as the orientation of the screen goes. And so this gives you a better idea for what this is going to look like when you bring it in to these different devices. And you can see I'm on the sidecar now, and the image itself pops up to the top of the page. And then as you keep scrolling, the text moves underneath it until you get to the next bit of text and the image changes. So it changes the way the user is going to experience that depending on which device you're displaying it. So I'm going to go back to the preview mode, and then I'm going to click on the edit story button to get back into the edit function. So that's how you preview it. The other option we have up here is the design option. If you click on that, a panel on the right-hand side opens up that allows you a little bit more control over the template options that we have in the story map. So I've got 3 different configurations for the cover page. One is the way we're viewing it right now, which is basically full. Then I've got one that's side by side. I've got one that's minimal, which basically has the image above the text. And you can play around with these to see what impact they have on the way your page looks. We've also got optional story sections. We're going to go ahead and add in this credit section. I'm going to turn that on, and we'll come back and look at that here in a moment down below. The other things to look at in the design function here is the themes. And these basically control the overall look and feel of the page. We've been working in this summit option, but if you change to Obsidian, for instance, it gives you this black with white text option. And so it kind of changes the character of the page overall. And Mesa does a little bit of different there, and the same goes for Ridgeline. So it gives you a little bit of variation in how the page looks as far as coloration and the font options that you have. Scrolling down a little farther on the design tab, you do have some changes to the background color that you can make here, and applying those. This will change, let's see, that was changing the icon colors using this customize option, but there's also font pairings, and these vary depending on which one of the themes you've selected. So the 2 pairs, there's only 4 options here, but whatever pairs appear for the Ridgeline, for instance, are going to be different than the ones that would appear for the Summit options. So those are different ways that you can customize the page a little bit more. I realize that the options are not extremely varied, but it does give you a little bit of ability to make some changes there. So let's go back into the design, or let's close the design view and go back into development here. Let's see, this should just close. Scroll back up to the top of the design panel, and there's an X on the right to close it. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, I want to show you that credits option. And I thought I turned mine on. Maybe I didn't. Let's go back to the design page and make sure that credits are turned on. And you should see at the bottom of your page this add a credit heading option. This is an important function for your page in that we want to give proper attribution for the images and text or other items that we might add to our page. So for instance, the opening photo would be an item that I should attribute. And so my attribution there would be this American Bottoms web page. So we took that page from that. So I'm just going to copy the URL, come back to my Mounds of Missouri page, and use that as the attribution. And sometimes for stuff like this, you might also want to mention when you downloaded that content. That's also a good way to document that. And so then you just hit return and it will automatically add another entry there. And so you can kind of build up the list of credits for all of the imagery and any other items that you borrowed. If we wanted to, we should attribute the National Geographic map, for instance. That would be another one. If we were to create our own maps, we could add that information down here in the credits as well. So I do believe that the only thing left is this idea of publishing. So if you go to the Publish drop-down menu, right now our map is set up as private, and that's why it's showing as draft. If you want anyone else to be able to view this, you have to share it with either the organization or with everyone. Everyone basically makes it available to the wider web, and anybody who has the URL for this story map would be able to come in and view it. For now, I'm going to share this with my organization, and this is the type of sharing you guys should apply when you're building your story map to turn into Andrea. You'll want to make sure it's shared with the organization, and that way she'll be able to view it and make comments upon it. But whatever you select here, just publish the story, and when you click this, the system goes through some checks to make sure it's properly the items are formatted. If you've added maps to the story map, then it makes sure that those are shared publicly. And if they're not, it will throw up a warning to let you know that you might need to address that. But now we've got it published, and if you go back up to the edit option, you'll see under the on the main toolbar, it's showing up as published. If I was to go in and make a few changes, let's say I wanted to change the text here, hidden mounds of St. Louis. If I did that, it's going to notate here that I've got unpublished changes. And so until I publish again, that is basically changes that wouldn't be shown on the shared version of the story map. So I'm going to publish that real quick. Nice work. Okay, so any questions? You guys ready to get rocking on your stories? Now, I will point out having the text document with the text blocks and the images associated with it is a great way to guide your development. Copying and pasting from the document makes it a lot simpler than actually trying to write while you're building your story map. Sometimes people do that though, and so it's really personal preference as to which one of those you would prefer to do. But either one of those is a good option as far as developing your content. I think that's it for me.
All right. Very cool, huh? I should have asked up front, actually. I may have muted somebody. I'm gonna unmute you now. I believe nobody has made a story map previously. Is that right? This would be your first round. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, no, it's very exciting. I think you can probably already see. Actually, this page we've been drawing on, this American Bottoms page website, which interestingly enough, it's partly. I'm going to look at the credits here since we're just talking about how to do credits properly. Co-created by Bill. This is Jennifer.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Is it
Jennifer Colton and Jesse Vogler.
Yeah, so actually I ran into her yesterday.
Did you?
And yeah, I was just wanted to get one of those oxygen breaks we all need to be taking, and she was out birding in Tower Grove Park.
Ah, excellent.
And so she said, "I wish I could share my my binoculars with you. Maybe not this time, but in any event, it was really neat because I got a real sense of." There on our syllabus, there are a couple of other links to her projects, but just her sensibility and the different ways you can communicate or create a sense of place, right? About about St. Louis. It could be about Weldon Spring, also in this website. I know we've seen this from looking at it on our own, but you can really, I hope, from this first training session, get a sense of where this could go with your own particular topics. But Cahokia certainly is a good place to start.
All righty.
Oh no, it's just terrific.
Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to actually stop my share, and I think I'm going to bow out because I have another class at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your time. We will, I will post this recording and we will review it and be ready to do stage 2 in a week's time.
Sounds great.
All right.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Thank you.
Let me know if you have any questions. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And then there were 5. So were you able to follow along pretty well? Good. Yeah, it seemed like it. It seemed like I'm in that perilous position where I sort of make one wrong step and I realize sort of game over for me, which is why I'm so glad we're recording these, because I'm just a little always behind the curve on keeping up with apparently what I construe as web design. I guess that's not exactly what this is. It's what it feels like to me. But in any event, I've noticed that my students seem to be able to usually kind of figure it out and then operate somewhat intuitively once you know the basic. So I hope that this will be useful. We have a number of things I'd like to do, but I wonder if a stretch break, screen break would be in order. We've been sitting here for a while. Shall we simulate that part of our class and maybe go get some air, maybe bathroom break, coffee, tea? I wish I could offer you some, but I'm sure you have your own resources. Shall we do that just to kind of freshen our heads? Sound like a plan? I'm getting a shrug, but I'm not getting a no. I refuse to take a break. Okay. All right. Well, let's reconnect then at 4. How's that? So just a little over.
Are we going to be using the whole class period this time then?
I don't think
before we might be going to like 4.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I mean, I guess I could put that as a choice. We can kind of barrel through and end a little earlier if that would be better. But we won't be using the entire class time. I actually wanted to budget the last half hour or so to do meetings to talk with you individually about podcasts, because they were all so exciting and I want to chat with you about them. But that's not something that needs to take us all the way to. Do you have a proposal for us, Kayla?
No, I just wanted to like make I just wanted to make sure because in the email like you had said 4, so I wasn't sure if we were ending at 4.
Yeah, no, we can. I want to take. Let's plan to go until about 4:30 today. But we'll end up early. Just wanted to.
Yeah, if people want a break, I'm fine with that. Or like going through doesn't matter to me.
All right. I shall make the call. We shall break. Let's reconvene in 15 minutes. So I'm going to pause the recording and just don't leave the meeting, but we'll collect back at 4. All right, cool. Thank you. There we are. Oh, that's nice. Getting some oxygen. Good, good, good. Nina's back. I'm going to unmute you all again. Okay, Camille's back. Sam's back. All right, cool. So as promised, yes, we will have an abbreviated session, especially because it looks like, at least for those of us who are in Missouri, incredibly nice outside. What's going on in Westchester, Sammy?
Weather-wise?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like really nice.
Terrific. So I wanted to do just a quick round of news and to take a look at some of the keywords and postings that have emerged over the last week. It's a bit of a mishmash because we have a I've tried to set up this material for the remainder of the semester to be kind of in a choose your own adventure format. That is to say, there will be a number of optional things. Some things will be weather permitting. Some things will be things that I want everyone to look at. For example, the introduction to Colin Gordon's Mapping Decline would be one thing that I want everybody to read. And Camille, I know you mentioned that you had read this previously. So I just want to spend about 10-15 minutes checking in using the resources that we've been collecting on Canvas. So I'm actually going to share my screen and just take us on a little Canvas tour. I've already pulled up some of the news postings for today, and so I thought I would just give them a little bit of airtime. I'm going to forget who posted what, but this is one of them, yes?
Yeah, I posted that. It just came up on my news feed, and I just thought it was really interesting. And I think it's like I'm hoping that in the future more people are paying attention to like the One Health movement, which like they talk about a little bit in terms of like they quote an interdisciplinary way of thinking. It's basically like combining like health of animals, environment, and people. And this article is just like talking about like how cutting down like trees where bats live brings them into like closer contact with humans and like makes it more likely for pandemics like this to happen. So yeah, I'm just like hoping in the future that people are paying more attention to like that movement in general. I just thought it was inflammatory. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I know Sammy, this was a concern of yours last week when we were talking about just general human-animal relationships. So which certainly, I feel like the story of climate change and the story of COVID-19 are becoming entangled as part of the same story, not exclusively the same story, but I think that really comes through in this article. You could absolutely do a story map about bats and find a way to connect it to St. Louis. It might be unlikely. It might involve agriculture. It might be, but I do want you to follow your interests here. So thank you for that, Kayla. And I think you had a second one.
Yeah, the other one was just like St. Louis news. And it was like kind of like a march that they had via cars. And so just to show like support for like healthcare workers. I thought that was like a pretty cool still like.
It's not a sorry, we'll get 27th. Oh no, there we go. Okay, skip the ad. Let's have a look.
It's just like cars parading through like certain hospital parking lots to show their support. That was cool.
Wow, that's incredible. So wait, this is, oh yeah, St. Elizabeth's. Okay.
It's just like interesting what people come up with.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, this is definitely the kind of traffic we want to have outside a hospital system, isn't it? Yeah, no, I saw something on Nextdoor telling me to clap clap for first responders and healthcare workers. I think it was something like 8 o'clock, every night. So I've been going out on my porch and just clapping, but I haven't heard anything back yet. So there's all kinds of efforts to, everybody go outside at 5 o'clock on Friday and have a collective happy hour, or everybody go outside. But this one seems to have coalesced. That's great. Every time I pass by, whether on bike or at this point, running or on, or in a car, when I pass by the Barnes Jewish and that hospital area, I'm always looking to see if there are lines. But so far, the external kind of emergency screening areas seem to be pretty low activity. As I realize that half of us are in St. Louis, so maybe you don't need this update, but just in case. This one, let me skip to somebody. Was this Sammy? Was this you?
That was me.
Oh, Nina, this is you. Okay, and you said you were. Well, go ahead. What have you got for us?
I just thought it was interesting. At first, I was trying to find news that wasn't related to the virus, but I realized that was really hard. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, okay, let me find like the next best thing, and I thought this was interesting. I don't know how I feel about it yet, but the governor of Missouri, because like there's such an economic downturn right now, mm-hmm. and people aren't buying things, spending money or whatever, he's freezing millions of dollars that would have been used for like repairs and things like that, but also education is going to take like a huge hit. Mostly didn't mention really any other school like specifically other than Mizzou, which I mm-hmm. thought was interesting. Like maybe a lot of that money was going towards Mizzou and their science programs and scholarships. So I think that school is going to get hit the hardest. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. It sort of talked a little bit about how people see higher education spending is like it's not super necessary, mm-hmm. which is why he's holding off on, he's freezing those funds. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, this is I think that hopefully once we're through this, the actual immediate health risks, once these have subsided, I think we'll be dealing with a much longer economic downturn. It sure seems like that right now, although there are, that's exactly the question we're having amongst the faculty here at WashU, and certainly in anthropology, talking about what gets cut. Something has to get cut. Where do we, where can we kind of tighten our belts, as they say. But I do know that both Mizzou and WashU have initiated a hiring freeze. That's one major, we'll say it's a major pause. It's just what needs to happen. But thank you for sharing that. This is go ahead.
Oh, and I was just saying, I always think that's interesting. Like when things are being cut, like what do people decide to cut? Mm-hmm. Like what do they? I don't know. Not maybe value more over other things, but I don't know yet. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Well, it does become a question of, and this actually could also be something if you wanted to think about, if you wanted to do a story map that is kind of, let's say, coronavirus informed or coronavirus adjacent, but not squarely maybe about the spread of coronavirus. This would be an area where you could look at the kinds of facility, the kinds of, just think about what would be a way to represent spatially or visually the spatial impacts of certain kinds of budget cuts, even as they are perhaps in some cases tentative, or right, we don't know exactly what's going to happen next. Certainly, something I've been thinking about is, well, actually, I'll just click over real quick to one other example. This is something that I saw on Nextdoor. Oh, and I know I've mentioned Nextdoor, but if you are not currently using it, it can actually be a great resource for just following along what people are talking about. And I think that technically maybe you're supposed to live in the neighborhood you follow, but believe there's any check on that. So I think you could probably at least drop in on or follow a couple of different neighborhoods. And this was just something that I noticed today, thinking about what it might look like to map the closure of certain buildings. So when we think about, in the case of WashU, who's considered an essential employee? It's not me, I'll tell you that much. But so the question of which buildings are going to still be lit up, which was the library. I believe the library is one of the last buildings on our campus to close. So if we thought about that writ large for the whole city and maybe the whole or the St. Louis region, I was in some ways surprised to learn that City Hall had in fact been open right up until today. But there would be a way to plot that out if you wanted to follow, say, news for the last few weeks and just think about what does that tell us about the essential functions of the city in a time of crisis. That would be another interesting project possibility. If you did want to be more, what is this? This is an ad, I think. A little bit more, if you're interested in a topic that could use mapping to think through what we're going through right now. This is both, I posted this under news and under our ArcGIS Story Maps resources, just thinking about how mapping can become a tool, not only for the World Health Organization or for Johns Hopkins, which are probably or the CDC, the three heaviest hitters for mapping the spread of the virus, but also just other related topics like we were talking about hospitals, traffic at hospitals, hospital bed capacity, other kinds of, say, they maybe reappropriation of parking lots across the city. Maybe that hasn't happened here yet. Hopefully it doesn't. But if you wanted to do a project that compared, say, what's going on in some parts of New York City with what we anticipate is going to happen elsewhere based on the maps, based on the models, that would be an interesting way to proceed with the project over the next few weeks. And of course, and this is why I wanted us to look at Cahokia for our workshop today, you're more than welcome to do something that has absolutely nothing to do with coronavirus. In fact, that might be exactly what's in order. But I wanted to share those items with you. A couple of other things. So speaking of maps, I was just kind of excited about this because I was on a virtual senior thesis, we call them conversations, but they're defenses this morning. And I had a student who had written a really amazing project about St. Louis. And I just wanted to share a couple of excerpts of his thesis with you because in fact, Colin Gordon, author of Mapping Decline, features quite prominently in my students' work. So I'm very proud of him. So I'm just going to brag on him for a moment. So this is a project about tax increment financing, not something we've talked about, but blight, which is a term that hopefully, if you're not already familiar with, then the Gordon reading gets in that direction. Although I have reduced the readings in some of the sections that discuss blight, I think that's one that ought to be one of our keywords if you are not yet finished with your presumably you're not finished yet with your keywords postings for the second half of the semester. In any event, I just thought I would find, here's where Gordon appears. So, so Brady writes, the Colin Gordon is a scholar who looks at tax increment financing through a historical approach. And here's the thesis author's take on this. Well, the book provides context on the history of St. Louis's urban development history. The supplemental website, and this is, I think, Sammy, what you wrote about in your posting. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Okay. Is most helpful. So thinking about this goal of whether it's in this case recontextualizing, tax increment financing as a policy for or practice, a tool for urban renewal, or recontextualizing some other aspect of the history of the city of St. Louis. So there are all different kinds of maps, of course, available for thinking through. And I wondered if maybe we could take a moment and just look at one or two of those. So, so where my my student here was very interested in the slum clearances and thinking about how this is history, and then also the more contemporary expressions through this policy of TIF. You know, this is one, as I say, this is sort of one way that you can draw on this interactive website. So I wanted to return to our postings here. There we go. Oh, and actually, Camille, yours is first, so maybe we can start with you. But is there anything in particular that you would want to point us to? First, I'm curious to know when you read this previously and what that was about.
So I read it actually this semester, and my class is called, it was called Gender and Social Class. So we kind of focused more on like the race and class aspect of it, which is basically like the underlying of the whole book. But I thought it was kind of interesting to reread the introduction, because like after having a lot of class discussions about it, the book just makes it like really clear that like the segregation of St. Louis is like extremely deep-seated. It's not like something that happened like slowly over time, but it was kind of established in the beginning, which is why, I don't know, for me it was just really interesting to see, because I feel like I didn't realize like the like history of St. Louis is like so rich in that regard. I think it's probably more extreme than like some other places in the country. So I thought it was really interesting, but it talked a lot about like some like things as simple as like zoning, and they would like give different zones like a different letter or something. So it was like A, B, C, and D, but these were like all like underlines of race. So but like A was like a gray area, and that would be like a white suburb, and this is like a place that they would say, oh, this is a place that we can invest in, we should like maintain this area. And then D is like, this can't be saved, and it's like mostly like Black or minority neighborhoods. So that was like one of the things that I thought was really interesting about it, like thinking about that again when I was reading the introduction. But yeah, I don't really know how to encompass the whole book, but I think it just shows, like race and class are like not really separate, and it's like people know that they work together, but it's like, and I guess the book kind of makes it seem like race and class are like, I don't want to say it one and the same, but it's like they can't exist without one another, which is like, I feel like it doesn't, that isn't saying it like strongly enough. Like it's like kind of like in this sense of the book, like class is like evolving on the basis of race. So it's like, I guess is how I would try and explain it.
Yeah.
Like it was like this like racism kind of came first, and then not first, I don't know how to explain it, but like the class system, especially in St. Louis, is like so dependent on race. And it talks a lot about like white flight and how like the urban like inner city is like kind of just synonymous with like Black and like white flight, and like how, oh yeah, there's just so many things going through my mind because I'm thinking about like Pruitt-Igoe and like just a lot of different things. But like some, I don't know. Anyway, you can read my posting.
No, I hear what you're saying. It is a lot to think through, and to try to maybe one way of coming up with language to kind of help us wrap our minds around this relationship between zoning, sort of real estate zoning, development zoning, and racism is not so much that one comes first or one it kind of is more important than the other, but perhaps that one is, they're sort of mutually constituted, that sort of one set of practices perpetuates another. So racist conditions beget racist housing policies, beget right. And I think that that's well, one of the things that I really like about this book about mapping decline is that I think Gordon is able to establish that a lot of this was not in any sense accidental, right?
Yeah, I think it's like really
in view racism, the design of racism, it becomes to me resistible in the sense of we no longer have to think of, oh, how did this happen, right? You know, oops, we slid into this. Like, this is not actually the story of St. Louis or so many other American cities. So I'm sure that you all have kind of got other takeaways, other things that you've noticed from this, but but it's a really exciting resource for that reason. I find it very depressing and very empowering all together, to thinking about, this is not the way things have to be. We can actually write this history in, very particular moments and very particular decisions made by policymakers. But Sammy, I had already referred to your posting in brief. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thought nugget?
Yeah, I had like similar thoughts as Camille, just like the labeling from A to B was like very comparative, like that sort of labeling only came in once there was like the need to like racially distinguish between certain neighborhoods. So even just like the connotations of something being like A versus B, I thought was interesting. I also thought like the like commercial trends in terms of like what districts stayed like predominantly industrious versus like where commercialized districts started emerging was interesting. They were like pretty sparse when they like moved away from the city, but the fact that they were was like more indicative of the suburb trend and that kind of fleeing like into the outer counties outside of the main city. And yeah, I think the trend of like redefining districts with like actual borders and just having those districts like relate so blatantly to race distinctions as well was like pretty clear in a lot of the interactive like coloring of the maps. And I just thought that the idea of like setting borders like blatantly like meant to keep population segregated, to be able to control like economic influx that way, was like more popularized in the later half of the 20th century. So it was interesting to see that kind of like pattern over time. I like the timeline aspects of it too.
Yeah, I think that can be one way of distilling some of what otherwise can feel like an overwhelming amount of information that's sort of presented in this text. Also, just some thing to consider for how you might structure your story map, regardless of the topic. But if you can attach a problem that you want to explore to a specific geolocation, to a specific address, the way that Gordon does, starting out with 4635 North Market Street, sort of, you could actually build your story around a particular address and tell the story of how that, whether it's a neighborhood, right, again, or a school, has changed over time. And I think we have access to some really fabulous online archives, both whether it's the pandemic archive that we looked at a little bit last week, or another archive that Bill will share with us next week, a maps archive. But most of the resources that you would use for this project can be accessed remotely as well. So that's one thing to stay excited about, as you think about how to tell the story part, right? How to actually build and construct your story in relation to maps. There was one other, and it's a little different. This was Kayla. You watched the Story Stitchers performance, which I'm so glad they made live, and that they've extended the viewing period for this, because I really learned a lot when I went to see the performance. It was the last thing I did before we all had to hunker down. So,
did you see? Was it like the same performance that you linked?
I think it was almost the same. There were some parts that were modified, but there was basically, we had sort of the nature beats. There were a couple of raps, some poems. It was a little more interactive, maybe with the audience. But
yeah, yeah, I actually kind of liked it on a digital platform because they were able to like voice over, like the whole first beginning was like probably stories that they would have said live, but it was like voiced over like very like, calming images of like bison grazing and like the grass and the wind, and it was like such like a stark juxtaposition. And then they didn't really even like address the like background until like the connections between the two until like midway through, which I thought was kind of cool, because at first you're just kind of like interpreting it for yourself. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just something I never really like thought about. Like, it's not like a connection that I would have made on my own. Like, bringing back, like, restoring Missouri prairie grasses.
Yeah.
Having to do with like African American youth.
Right. And you mentioned, is this in your post here? I was impressed in the performance I saw that the direct connections to mental health that were not, to me, obvious, right?
That it just like takes people back to such like a meditative stage, and like it's a place that like where they can like totally shape their own stories, that is not really like there's no one like kind of speaking for them in the nature and meditative stage of the prairies. And I think like it's interesting because it's like a lot of the, like I was thinking about it, and like I feel like a lot of people involved in like environmental movements or like outing clubs and like stuff like that, like are all pretty much like white people, you know? And I think like it could be really empowering to see a lot more diversity in that movement as well, and like empowering on both sides, like for environmental issues and like racial issues. So like I thought that was like a cool story that they put together.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, me too. I would definitely recommend this if you haven't already watched it. And we had, I think, I want to shift over just quickly to our keywords, which are hiding back here. We had just a couple. They're on the sparse side, but I suspect that in the next week or two, you will have some very good entry. Oh, whoop, this is an older one, gentrification. But let's see, there was one other. Kayla, you had drawn on one from, was it from one Atlantic article from last week? Is that right? Decentralized.
Yeah, I thought that article was like really interesting, just because in general a lot of like the US system doesn't make sense, like in terms of like voting and all of that to me, but like it didn't really dawn on me how much it affects public health. And because like until like I realized like how decentralized it really is, like it's like one of the most decentralized public health systems in the world, because like I feel like states during this crisis are kind of like just making their own decisions. And I don't know how like beneficial that is, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a term that I think it's very relevant, of course, for what we're dealing with right now. But there's one other spot of my student thesis that I'd like to use to try and draw a kind of a thematic bridge between the response to federal versus state versus municipal and so forth, response to coronavirus, and then just how that plays out when we're not talking about maybe just this kind of acute emergency that we're dealing with. But there's a phrase or a way of thinking about the devolution of responsibility for a city like St. Louis that I've been thinking with recently. It's called the fiscalization of local governments. And I want for you, as you're pondering your projects, to think about and notice as you're able, where decision making happens around the funding of a project. So there could, and this could be, if you choose to focus on education in schools, like working out what is the city budget for. I know Nina, your project, your podcast was very concerned with this question of who pays for basic needs at a St. Louis public high school. But this idea that really since the 1970s, there's been a reduction in federal funding for all kinds of aspects of city life and sort of public services that used to be provided for through different funding streams, and that increasingly, my student focused on Cortex and the Central Corridor, but specifically when you look at with this concept of blight, that a neighborhood has to be considered sort of unredeemable in terms of urban renewal in order to receive this tax increment financing, which would allow for the building of something you've probably all seen. We may have even driven past it together, but the Whole Foods in the Central West End as an example, that the decision to pour cash into one area perhaps at the expense of another, is one that is derived of a logic of return on investment that has to do with what this keyword that I'm proposing to you all, of fiscalization of local governments, where the sort of the profit mentality becomes, I think the language my student uses here is weaponized, but to push forward policies that are going to increase tax revenue without necessarily improving, say, the quality of life and number of resources for public school students. So just something to be thinking about, that this issue of decentralization is one that's always present. Maybe we're just feeling it more acutely now. So we are at 4:30, and I have, I guess I will keep my promise to let you go a little early. I'd like for you to bank this next hour toward doing some kind of a walk in the next week if you're able, and it doesn't have to be right now, it doesn't have to be today, but I have posted under modules, again, sort of reduced readings, but that are kind of, I view this as sort of a whimsical reading that is called Mapping the Invisible Landscape. Just one excerpt I'd like you to read from this book. And it'll get you, I think, to conceptualize mapping as a verb in a different way. But I view it as kind of a hybrid of the spirit of the Walking in the Weather World piece that we read at the beginning of the semester, maybe mixed with a more attentiveness toward the scale of things that we map. So again, thinking about individual footsteps and just the way that we conceive of ourselves in a place. And since we are all either in different parts of St. Louis or different parts of Missouri or the country, I think this is a reading that will apply to you and feel, hopefully feel interesting and maybe even enjoyable as something that you can do before you go for a walk. And again, I'm just asking that you walk for roughly an hour to an hour and a half. It can be in any direction, but just to do this reading before you go and see what you notice, again, in this time of radically reduced traffic, radically reduced human interaction, probably radically reduced noise or sound pollution. But spring has sprung, at least here. And so I think that makes it an extra rich time to be outside. I don't think that I would have noticed that bees have just started buzzing if it weren't for coronavirus. I'm not necessarily saying that makes it worth the moment, but things that I, by being forced to slow down, I think become more, the seasonality of this moment becomes more palpable to me. So that's what I'm excited about for next week. We will spend the first half of the session with Bill, and then we'll probably do like today and just take roughly half an hour to go over news, hopefully for hearing from everyone, and to discuss your walking experiences. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, all right. So I have also, I'm going to let you go, but I have feedback for you on your podcast, which I'm happy to deliver in the form of sort of meetings over the course of the next hour, or even hour or two, or I can just send you a couple of brief written comments, but I'd be delighted to conference with you. I also, one last thing. Would you be willing to share your podcast with one another? Because I feel like I've just been this receptacle of all these very cool stories. And I know there was some self-consciousness previously, like before you submitted them, but I can take it on my authority that every single one of these is worth listening to. And I think it's kind of a shame if only a couple people ever hear them. So I'm reading your faces here. This is not at all required, but if you would consider sharing them with one another, I would like to send out the links so that maybe on a portion of your walk, you could, spare 15 minutes of your walk to actually listen to one another's stories. And just as a for instance, what do you think?
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
What do you think, Camille?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. I'm taking that as I'm taking your faces as a coerced yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to circulate those, and I encourage you to listen to one or two, or even three, since there are only four. And yeah. but yeah, I'll be sending you feedback in the next hour, and if you hang on the meeting now, or if you want to jump back in the next hour and a half, we can definitely also go over kind of the highlights and the high notes of your work. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for an excellent session. I'm really, again, thrilled that you were able to join me for some semblance of the olden days, but we will reconnect in a week. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.